Have you ever witnessed something that started like a nightmare but ended as one of the most touching moments you've ever seen? I was there when a group of leather-clad bikers surrounded a blind veteran at a highway rest stop. The tension was palpable. But stay with me, because what happened 20 minutes later, when the army rolled in, left everyone in tears. Welcome to Honor Echoes, where we bring you the untold stories of our brave veterans. Before I tell you what happened that day at Interstate 81 Rest Stop, make sure you subscribe to our channel to discover more extraordinary stories of courage, brotherhood, and honor that deserve to be remembered. It was a crisp October morning in Virginia, the kind where the air feels like it's washing your lungs clean with each breath. The mountains were painted with autumn colors, brilliant oranges, fiery reds, and fading yellows. I had stopped at the Troutville rest area off Interstate 81 for a quick coffee break on my drive to Washington, D.C. I noticed him immediately. An elderly man with dark glasses, a military cap adorned with Vietnam War pins, and a white cane. He moved with that distinctive confidence some blind people have, like they've mapped every inch of the world in their mind. The patches on his faded army jacket told a story before he even spoke. Airborne Division, Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart. His name, I would later learn, was Master Sergeant James Eagle Harrington, retired after 27 years of service. But at that moment, he was just an elderly, blind veteran navigating a busy rest stop alone. I watched him find his way to a bench outside, his movements deliberate and practiced. The rumble came first. If you've ever heard a dozen Harley-Davidsons approaching in formation, you know it's a sound that reverberates in your chest before your ears. The parking lot suddenly filled with motorcycles. Big, gleaming machines with riders dressed in leather vests covered in patches. Some wore bandanas, others had long beards. The patches on their backs read, "Veterans Riding Brotherhood." For a moment, I felt uneasy. The scene looked intimidating. These tough-looking bikers parking in a semicircle around the bench where the blind veteran sat. I wasn't the only one who noticed. Other travelers stopped, some retreating to their cars, others pulling out phones, ready to call for help or perhaps record whatever was about to happen. The bikers dismounted in unison, like a choreographed dance they'd performed 100 times. 15 men and 3 women, moving with purpose toward the blind veteran. Their boots crunched on the gravel as they surrounded the bench. The veteran's head turned slightly at the sound, but his expression remained calm. The largest of the bikers, a mountain of a man with a silver beard that reached his chest, approached first. His vest was adorned with military patches and a president rocker. He stopped directly in front of the veteran and spoke words I couldn't hear from my position. The blind veteran's face transformed instantly, from neutral patience to a wide smile that revealed a missing canine tooth. He stood up with surprising agility and threw his arms around the large biker. They embraced like brothers who hadn't seen each other in decades. Curiosity overcame my caution. I moved closer, pretending to examine the vending machines nearby. I could hear them now. "Eagle, you old son of a gun," the biker leader was saying. "When we heard you were passing through, we had to come." "Grizzly," the blind veteran said, his hands reaching up to touch the biker's face in recognition. "Is that really you? It's been what, 30 years?" 32, Grizzly corrected, his voice gruff but warm. "Cambodia, 1973. The other bikers formed a protective circle around the reunion, creating a bubble of privacy in the public space. I learned later that Grizzly and Eagle had served together in a special operations unit during the final days of the Vietnam War. They had been separated during an extraction under heavy fire. Each had believed the other was dead for decades, until a Veterans Affairs database match connected them just 3 weeks earlier. What I was witnessing wasn't an intimidation. It was a reunion. The bikers weren't threatening the blind veteran. They were honoring him. Many of them, I would discover, were Vietnam veterans themselves, part of a riding club dedicated to supporting military veterans. As they talked, the blind veteran ran his fingers over the patches on Grizzly's vest, reading the history there. He laughed at something, then grew serious. He asked about other names: Johnson, Hernandez, Whitaker, comrades from long ago. Some answers brought nods, others brought momentary silences. One of the female bikers approached with a leather vest. With reverence, they helped the blind veteran remove his army jacket and slip into the vest. On the back was a custom patch, an eagle with outstretched wings above the words, Master Sergeant James Harrington, Original Brotherhood. They had prepared for this moment. Eagle's fingers traced the embroidery on the back, and though he couldn't see it, he seemed to understand what it depicted. His expression crumbled momentarily, decades of emotion breaking through his composed exterior. One tear, then another tracked down his weathered cheeks. "You didn't forget," he said simply. "We never forget our own," Grizzly replied, his voice thick. The group moved to a picnic area, helping Eagle navigate. They shared coffee from thermoses and swapped stories. Not just war stories, though there were plenty of those, but stories of coming home, of struggling to adjust, of building lives after service. Eagle told them how he'd lost his sight, not in combat, but to a degenerative condition 15 years after returning home. How he'd had to relearn everything. How the military training had given him the discipline to adapt. Travelers came and went from the rest stop, most giving the group a wide berth. Some took photos discreetly, probably misunderstanding what they were seeing. I remained, captivated by this unexpected reunion playing out before me. Around the 40-minute mark, Grizzly checked his watch and nodded to one of the other bikers, who stepped away to make a phone call. The conversation around the table continued, but I sensed a shift in energy, an anticipation. 15 minutes later, I heard it. The distinctive rumble of diesel engines approaching. 3 olive-drab vehicles pulled into the parking lot, 2 transport trucks and a Humvee. The vehicles bore the insignia of the United States Army. The doors opened and soldiers in dress uniforms emerged, forming a line. A commanding officer stepped forward, a full colonel based on the eagles on his shoulders. The bikers stood respectfully, forming an honor corridor leading to Eagle. Grizzly leaned over to Eagle. "There's someone here to see you, brother." The colonel approached and stood at attention before the blind veteran. "Master Sergeant James Harrington," he said formally. Eagle stiffened instinctively at the voice of authority, his military bearing returning instantly. He started to raise his hand in a salute, but the colonel stepped forward and embraced him instead. "Uncle James," the colonel said, his voice softening. "We've been looking for you for a long time." The colonel, as it turned out, was Matthew Wilson, Eagle's sister's son. He had followed his uncle into military service, but had lost touch with him years ago when Eagle had gone off the grid after losing his sight. The colonel had been searching for his uncle for years, working through military channels. It was his inquiry that had ultimately led to the Veterans Affairs database match that connected Eagle with Grizzly. But the colonel wasn't alone. From the transport trucks, 32 soldiers emerged, men and women of various ages, all in dress uniform. They formed a semicircle behind the colonel. These soldiers, the colonel explained to his visibly confused uncle, all served under your command at different points in your career. When we found you, they volunteered to be here. One by one, the soldiers approached Eagle, introduced themselves, and shared how he had impacted their lives. Some were young, too young to have served directly under Eagle, but they were children of those who had. They carried messages, mementos, and gratitude. A staff sergeant presented Eagle with a shadow box containing the medals he'd earned but never received, including a silver star that had been approved but never presented due to administrative errors during the chaotic end of the Vietnam War. "The Army never forgot your service, Master Sergeant," the colonel said formally as he prepared to read the long-delayed citation. As the colonel read the account of Eagle's heroism, how he had led a dangerous extraction mission to rescue downed airmen behind enemy lines, I watched the faces around me. The bikers stood at respectful attention. Travelers who had stopped for a quick break now stood witness to this impromptu ceremony, many recording with their phones. Children watched wide-eyed as real heroes were honored before them. The citations ended with the traditional words, "Master Sergeant Harrington's actions are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, the Airborne Division, and the United States Army." There wasn't a dry eye at that rest stop, from the hardened bikers to the Army personnel to the civilian onlookers. Something profound had happened in this ordinary place. A circle had been completed. Recognition, long delayed, had finally arrived. The formal ceremony concluded, but no one rushed to leave. The bikers, the soldiers, and Eagle moved back to the picnic area where food now appeared from the Army trucks. A proper meal to celebrate. Civilians were welcome to join, and many did, asking questions or sharing stories, connecting with both veterans and active duty personnel. I watched Eagle throughout the afternoon. His face registered every voice, his memory filling in the visual details his eyes could no longer provide. He seemed to grow younger as the hours passed, surrounded by respect, recognition, and most importantly, remembrance. As the gathering finally began to disperse, I approached Eagle, introduced myself, and asked if I could share his story. His hand found mine with surprising accuracy, his grip still military firm despite his years. "People think the hardest part of being blind is not seeing," he told me. "It's not. It's wondering if you've been forgotten. Today proves I never was." He gestured to the dissipating crowd. "None of us were. That's the story worth telling." The bikers escorted Eagle to the colonel's vehicle, forming an honor guard as he departed. I learned later that Eagle would be reconnecting with his extended family after years of self-imposed isolation. The bikers promised to visit regularly, a brotherhood renewed after decades apart. As the rest stop returned to its usual state, travelers coming and going, barely noticing each other, I sat alone, reflecting on what I'd witnessed. In a world that often seems divided, I had seen disparate groups, military personnel, veteran bikers, and ordinary civilians unite in respect for sacrifice and service. But most powerfully, I had witnessed healing. Wounds decades old had begun to close. Recognition, long deserved but never received, had finally been given. A man who thought himself forgotten discovered just how wrong he had been. It had started with bikers surrounding a blind veteran at a rest stop. It had ended with the restoration of a man's place in the world. And I had been there to see it all. This story of Master Sergeant James Eagle Harrington reminds us that behind every veteran is a story of sacrifice, courage, and brotherhood that deserves to be told. Sometimes healing comes decades later, but it's never too late for recognition. What unexpected acts of honor have you witnessed? Share your stories in the comments below. And if you want to hear more powerful stories of veterans like Eagle, subscribe to Honor Echoes and hit the notification bell. Our mission is to ensure that the echoes of honor continue to resonate through generations. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary places.